This is a four-part series from the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Especially Prabhu is going to talk about the accommodative nature of Lord Krishna in terms of the place and the pace we want to approach him. So today the subtopic is working for Krishna. And just to give a brief introduction about Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, he's a monk, motivational speaker, and a spiritual life coach, and an author. Prabhu is highly regarded by his audiences for his intellectually stimulating presentation, addressing modern day challenges based on the timeless Vedic principles. He is an engineer by education and a spiritual observer by training. Chaitanya Charan Prabhu has penned over 2000 daily wisdom articles on the Bhagavad Gita, and it's featured on his website www.gitadaily.com. So apart from authoring more than 20 books of wisdom, he delivers inspirational talks in several reputed universities and companies worldwide, and has also been an invited speaker at UNESCO's World Peace Conference. So with that, I'll hand it over to Chaitanya Charan Prabhu for the part 2 of the series.
Thank you, Prabhu. I'm grateful to be with all of you today. So let's begin. Om Jnanatimirannasya Jnananjanishalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So we're discussing Bhagavad Gita 12.8 to 11, and we're discussing it from the 12.11 bottom up we are moving. Yesterday I discussed about these verses, and 12.11 was about being selfless. That means I talked about, before that, these verses are 12.10 talks about working for Krishna, then 12.9 talks about fixing the mind on Krishna, and 12.8 talks about being absorbed in Krishna. And in that journey, when we are moving forward, so before, if somebody cannot even do that, I did a quick overview of the Bhagavad Gita yesterday, where I explained how Krishna addresses Arjuna's dilemma by first talking about Karma Yoga, then renouncing the world to get to Ashtanga Yoga, then coming to Bhakti Yoga as the pathway to the same perfection that comes through Karma Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga. And then how Bhakti Yoga itself is multi-level. So in that connection, we talked about the elevation and expansion of consciousness, that our consciousness, it needs to not just, if it is shrunk, we are self-centered. It needs to grow horizontally. If we care for others, it's expansion. We start caring for higher spiritual reality, that's elevation. What we need is evolution. Both expansion and elevation need to happen. So those were the broad themes that we discussed yesterday. And now I'll talk about this whole concept of how Krishna integrates work in this world with bhakti. So now direct service to Krishna's seva is something which we often talk about, and that is what we are expected to, we aspire to do. We try to go to the temple and do some service. Even nowadays, virtually there are so many services we can do, and we have in our general discussions we do talk significantly about it. So I will focus on this part of Swadharma. This is central to the Gita's own dynamic, because in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna wants Arjuna to do his Swadharma. For him, the Swadharma is doing his duty as a Kshatriya, fighting to establish Dharma in the world. So it's interesting how the Gita correlates Swadharma with Dharma. That Dharma is, Krishna said, Dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge. And I come to establish order in the world. And how will I establish order in the world? How, with human agents. Krishna can do everything himself, but he usually uses human agents. And those human agents need to do their Swadharma. So when Arjuna does the Kshatriya Dharma, then Krishna will be able to establish Dharma in the world. So that's how the idea of work as worship comes in. So let's look at this theme now. And like yesterday, at any point, if you have questions, as I said, this is based on 18.46 primarily because this term there comes over there. Swakarmana tamabhyarcha. However, that same however, that same theme is talked about over here also. That's why we are discussing in this 4-level series. Now, is there a difference between Swadharma and Seva? Not necessarily, as rightly pointed out here, that for Arjuna, his Swadharma is also Seva. So everything can be done with a Seva bhav, that all our duties can be done with a service attitude. Even apad dharma, somebody may be in emergency and they have to do some duty apart from the normal duty. Even that can be done with a service attitude. Specifically here, I am referring to, every word can be used in a broader sense and in a specific sense. So in a broad sense, like we say, Sankirtan includes everything that we do for spreading the glories of the holy name. So Sankirtan department can mean the book distribution department. Sankirtan can also mean specifically dancing along with the singing of the holy names. So we are looking, we have to see in what context we are using the words. So here I'm to some extent differentiating. Swadharma means that we do our work and then we offer it to Krishna. And then there is some Krishna's representatives give us some work and we do it. So that is these two levels which I mentioned here. Sorry, so these two levels here, Seva and Swadharma. Technically, what is the difference between the two? As a direct service to Krishna means that we are told to do something. Okay, can you manage book distribution over here, or can you give this class, or can you take care of this particular logistics? So that is something which is told to us. So that's Seva. And Swadharma is, okay, I have a job, I have a family, I have to take care of them. This is what I like to do. This is what is my passion in my life. I want to do it, but I want to do it in the mood of service for Krishna. So in that sense, we can differentiate between the two. Of course, Swadharma, we want, less like for Arjuna, Swadharma was Seva. So we also want our Swadharma to become Seva. But let's begin with the differentiating first. And why I want to differentiate here is that because of a specific historical reason within our movement. The historical reason was that our movement began as primarily a monastic movement. To join ISKCON meant moving into the temple. That's what happened with most of Srila Prabhupada's early disciples. And thereafter, that was the definition mostly. And that's why having a career, having the family, that was just considered a distraction. If you have a job, okay, just finish it off, do whatever you can, get over with it, so that you can do your real service in the temple, real service for the movement. Now that is a valid way of looking at it. At the same time, that need not be the only way of looking at things. And I'll explain when it is not. That there are different ways in which somebody can serve Krishna. So when Arjuna was practicing his archery, Arjuna was not thinking, I actually want to worship Krishna. Is archery just something in the way? Let me get over with so that I can do my archery, so that I can really do my bhajan. No, he was doing his archery also diligently. And there is no indication that Arjuna had any kind of omniscience or prescience. That Arjuna know in his childhood that in the future there's going to be Dharma Yuddha in which my archery skills are going to be used? There's no indication in the Mahabharata that Arjuna had that kind of uh, knowledge of the future, prescience. So he just saw, I'm a Kshatriya, this is my duty, I have to do it well. So there is in the Bhagavad Gita a part of called Loka Sangraha. Loka Sangraha means maintaining the world. And every individual has to play a part in maintaining the world. And that part is quite important in the Gita. That historically, because our movement started as a monastic movement, that part was significantly downplayed. However, now our movement is not a monastic movement. That is largely a congregation-based movement. And yes, congregation devotees are also doing a lot of services in the temple in many ways, many places. They are running the movement where there are no monks. So, and that's so the demographic change has not changed the missionary nature of the movement. But the point is that the career, family, one's profession is an important part, is a far more important part for our movement's members than it was in the first generation. And as if we just have this attitude, oh, this is just something which I have to get over with, then that may first of all not be functionally the healthiest attitude, and that may be in dissonance from the teachings of the Gita. So let's look at what the teachings of the Gita are. So what do we mean by work as worship? That, see, this is the, like I was talking yesterday, I said we'll go beyond digital to analog conceptions of bhakti. So the digital conception of bhakti is on the okay, yeah, this is the digital conception of bhakti. This is my workplace. I leave my workplace and I go to the temple, and then I leave my temple and come to the workplace. And yes, in one sense, it is good to begin with some kind of black and white understanding. But eventually, we want to come to a level where we see that Krishna is present much more prominently in the temple, in the sense that Krishna's presence is manifest much more to me when I go to the temple. But that does not mean Krishna is absent in my workplace. Krishna's jurisdiction extends everywhere. If it extends everywhere, that means it extends even to my workplace. And Krishna is present there also. So now we'll come to the point of work according to Swadharma a little later. Current work not be compatible. But the point is that work itself is not incompatible with bhakti. There is work, it's the idea of working in the world itself. We may say, oh, today's world is very rajasic or tamasic. Well, Arjuna was in a battlefield. And a battlefield is also rajasic and tamasic. It's fighting and killing. So we may say cutthroat competition is there in today's world. But it's not just cutthroat competition for Arjuna. It was actually cutthroat. It is actually killing people. So Rajas, and just because the atmosphere is Rajasic and Tamasic, so that doesn't mean that one cannot do it with a bhakti disposition. So the idea is we want to be able to be Krishna conscious in every domain of our life. So let's begin with first some misconceptions. Here Krishna is telling that he says that okay, let's discuss the verse first. So yesterday I discussed 12.10. Now if I discuss 12.9, so 12. Sorry, yesterday I discussed 12.11. So if I discuss 12.9 now, can you see my screen? I discussed 12.11. We'll discuss 12.10 today. What is Krishna exactly say in this verse before we move ahead?
We are seeing your PPT, Prabhu.
Okay, yeah, I think this is, I'm not sharing my full screen. Sorry about that. Okay, so abhyasepya samarthosi mat karma paramo bhava madarthamapi karmani kurvan siddhim avapsyasi. So here, because Krishna is going from top down, whereas we are going from bottom up to come to the culmination. So Krishna is talking about the previous level before this, abhyas. That is, fix the mind on Krishna. So abhyasepya samarthosi. If you cannot fix your mind on me, then mat karma paramo bhava. That you work for me. Mat karma paramo bhava. Make me your parama. Make me your supreme goal by working for me. Mat karma paramo bhava. So mad artham api karmani. In this way, if you work for me, kurvan siddhim avapsyasi. You will attain perfection. So here Krishna is, it's interesting using the word karma twice, and the prefix mat is also twice. So mat karmani and mat karma. And then here siddhi, of course, is perfection. Avapsyasi is attaining. Now there is this word artham and paramo. Mad artham. Mad artham means for my sake you work. And mat karma paramo bhava. Parama, karma can mean transcendental, parama can mean supreme. So mat karma paramo bhava. You can be transcendental by working for me. You can make working for me as the supreme value of your life. So here Krishna is essentially talking about working for him. So let's look at this particular verse 12:10 now, and what it implies. So that same theme Krishna talks in 1846, where he says swakarmana tamabhyarcha. Now many people translate swakarmana tamabhyarcha, many people means many Gita commentators or translators, they translate it as work is worship. Whereas Krishna is saying something different. He's saying work as worship. Swakarmana tamabhyarcha. Work as worship. Whereas what he's saying is work is worship. This is what this particular translation is. Now this translation or this particular idea that work is worship, it can be a valuable as an ethical principle for social reformation. That means if in certain societies, in certain culture, say some kind of people are looked down upon, or some kinds of work are looked down upon, then there should be dignity of labor. All kind of work should be respected. That idea itself is good. So in that sense, the work, to say that work is worship, that is an ethical principle, is fine. And it can lead to people valuing each other more, valuing various forms of work more. However, is it a philosophical principle? Is it a teaching of the Gita meant for its purpose of spiritual redirection? So we're not devaluing or trashing the principle. The principle has its utility. But the question is this the teaching of the Gita? There are two different things over here. There are many things which are ascribed to the Gita, because the Gita is a well-known book. Many people pass off their teaching, their own ideas, as teachings of the Gita. Many of you may have heard this common rendition of the Gita Sar, the essence of the Gita. जो हुआ वो अच्छा हुआ, जो हो रहा है वो अच्छा हो रहा है, जो होने वाला है वो भी अच्छा ही होगा. Whatever has happened is good, whatever is happening is good, whatever will happen will also be good. Now you can read the Gita as many times as you want. I have read it dozens and dozens of times. I have had friends who have read it many more times than me. And I asked them, none of them has been able to come up with any verse which is similar, anywhere similar to this. Because the Gita's thrust is actually not what is how, not analyzing what is happening. It is analyzing what Arjuna should be doing, what we should be doing. Because Arjuna's question was, Pruchhami Tvam Dharma Sammudha Chetaha. I want to know what is Dharma, what is the right thing to do. So, from that perspective, there are teachings ascribed to the Gita which are not actually the teachings of the Gita. And that's what happens over here with the idea of work is worship. So, work is not worship. We can work as worship, or as Krishna says, worship through work. So, here we could have a, okay, let me make this full screen. Yeah. So, here we could have a Venn diagram. Normally speaking, when we talk about work, what does it involve? It involves various activities done for remuneration or position. That's why we work in the world. Somebody says, I love my work. Well, okay, it's good if you love your work. But the very fact that we have to be paid to work means that's not something which you intrinsically like to do. We do it because we want some extrinsic reward from the work. So there is extrinsic reward can be either position, or I do it so that I get respected in society and I get some money, remuneration. So work involves activities done in the world for getting some reward in terms of the world. On the other hand, worship is generally meant to be directing us towards a reality beyond the world. So if I am here, the world is here. So work directs me toward the world, and worship generally directs me away from the world, or you could say above the world, toward the Lord. So worship involves activities done for connecting with the divine. So in that sense, work and worship are two separate, two circles. Now they can have an overlap, but they are not identical circles. If somebody says work is worship, that means they are saying these two circles are identical. Well, no, they are not identical. There are activities which are not necessarily involving work. There are activities here which are, we may do activities which may not at all be classifiable as worship, and there may be worship forms of worship which may not be includable as work. I'll explain what I mean by this. Now, when Krishna uses swakarmana tam abhyarcha, so abhyarcha is specifically worship, and Krishna also later on uses this word worship or ijjate in a very inclusive sense. Toward the end of the Gita, in 1870, he says that even studying the Gita is an act of worship. He says, Adeshyate cha yaimam dharmyam samvadamavayo jnana yagyena tenaham ishtasyamiti me matihi. So he says, ishtasyamiti me mati. He says that you are worshipping with your intelligence. So Krishna uses the word worship also in a broader sense. So the idea over here is, if we look at 1846, what Krishna is saying is that there is functioning in the world and there is connecting with the one who is the source of the world. Yataha pravrittir bhutanam yena sarvamidam tatam swakarmana tam abhyarcha siddhim vindati manava. That Lord who is the source of everything, that Lord who pervades everything, worship that Lord with your work. So in that sense, what Krishna is talking about worship is, he's talking about any means by which we are connecting with the Lord. And work is that anything by which we function in the world. So work as worship is possible. Work is worship is not. Because not everything that we do connects with the Lord. Let's see how. So is all work worship? Suppose somebody says, I'm a robber. That's my job. That's what I have been trained, and I do it very well. Is that worship? Well, no, that can't be worship. If somebody says, I'm begging, that's my work. If somebody says, I'm a contract killer, I kill. And that's how I take care of my family. Well, is that going to be worship then? Mm. No, that's not worship. So we cannot say that all work is itself worship. We'll discuss later when does the work become worship. And conversely, we can say that same point if we take it further, that if work itself made somebody a worshipper, then the donkey would be the greatest worshipper. Because the donkey works so hard, harder than everyone else. But then we say that hard work is not enough. Even in a mundane sense, we say, don't just work hard, work smart. So we have been using intelligence, and we are meant to use the intelligence constructively. So work itself is not worship. Now, another implication of that work is worship is that, so if you go back to this circle now, yeah. See, I said that work, if we are saying work is worship, then what happens is, then these two circles become identical. Now, if these circles become identical, then one implication of that is that all work is considered sacred. But we just discussed that all work is not necessarily sacred. And all those who do work are not necessarily considered sacred. Now, the other implication of that is just as troubling. The first implication is ethically problematic. Said a robber or a contract killer cannot be considered worshipping. So it's ethically problematic. But the other implication is, so when these two circles become identical, one implication that all work is worship, that is ethically problematic. But the other implication is, if work itself is worship, then there is no need to do worship at all. Because by my work itself, I'm worship. So it makes worship redundant. By worship, what do I mean? As I said, activities to connect with the divine. Any activities by which we are connecting with the divine, that's worship. So, is worship unnecessary? Now, if we consider, does work itself elevate our consciousness? If we consider the purpose of work is to contemplate higher, the purpose of worship rather, sorry, not work. The purpose of worship is to contemplate higher realities. Then it is that during our work, how often do we contemplate higher realities? The work doesn't elevate our consciousness. In fact, work, it entangles our consciousness. I have to get this done. I have to get this done. This person doing like this. I have to deal with that. That person has done this, and I spoke there at that time. And how do I deal with that? And we do, our consciousness doesn't rise necessarily to higher things. It just gets caught in more immediate things. So without proper spiritual practice, our work often entangles us. It doesn't in itself elevate us. Now, the Bhagavad Gita was a very important book for many of India's many of India's leaders who fought for independence. Of course, many of them had their own readings of the Gita. We know a prominent Indian freedom fighter thought that the Gita teaches non-violence. And another prominent Indian leader said that the Gita teaches karma yoga. So what happened was, but nonetheless, whatever the specific teachings, many of these political leaders, many of these freedom fighters, they saw India's independence struggle not just as a political struggle. They saw it as a means to revive India's spiritual wisdom and culture. So they had that vision that yes, India is meant to contribute spiritually to the world, but only when we are free can we contribute. But unfortunately, when India got independence, two things happened which just swept India's spirituality out of the political horizon of the country's rulers. The first was the partition. The partition was a horrendous event. Sometimes the Holocaust is considered to be such a terrible thing because 6 million Jews were killed over there. Yes, that is true, and it is definitely horrendous. But during the partition, estimates vary, but nearly 1 million people were killed on both sides. So it's a catastrophic toll. And whatever be the specific causes of the partition, overall, India's political leaders thought that it was religion that caused it. And if India wants to avoid strife, India wants to avoid getting caught in conflicts, we need to just put religion on the side. And on top of that, in 1950, Gandhiji was assassinated. And that assassination was pinned on a Hindu fanatic. And it was, now again, I don't want to go into the politics of what happened. But the idea was that, oh, Hinduism breeds such fanatics that a Hindu fanatic killed a person who is considered one of the greatest spiritual leaders of the 20th century. A leader who inspired Einstein, a leader who subsequently inspired Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela. So that created a lot of bad press. And because of both these reasons, or using both these reasons as justifications, the Indian leaders at that time, they just completely put India on the path of secular socialistic growth and removed religion completely from the at least from the political horizon. Cultural landscape, India was filled with religion, but politically it was completely removed from even the horizon, level on the landscape. Landscape means what is around us. Horizon is what we even see ahead of us. So among the only teachings of the Gita has devotional teachings, the Gita has spiritual teachings, the Gita has many philosophical teachings. Among all the teachings of the Gita, the only teachings that were survived were fragmented teachings like this. Work is worship. Now, work is worship went very well with the socialist ethos, because in socialism, the idea is that workers of the world, that is communism, of course, and socialism was a milder version of communism, that workers of the world unite. You have all the power. You should capture power. You should rule the world. So they used the idea that work is worship to say that worship itself is unnecessary. There is no need to go to a temple. There is no need to worship God. There is no need to do this puja or that. All that you just do your work. If you do your work, then everything good will come. Even God will bless you. So the Gita was used to justify this despiritualization of India's political horizons. And that is unfortunate, because the Gita was intended for the spiritualization of the political horizons. In one sense, when we use the word politics, sometimes has a negative connotation. But the fact is, politics can mean either politicking, that means somebody is backbiting and manipulating and character assassinating, or politics can simply mean the system of governmental administration of society. So it can be a functional term. And if we consider when Krishna has the Kurukshetra war, Krishna guides the Pandavas in fighting the Kurukshetra war, that is meant to bring about a political change. There was an unscrupulous ruler who was there. He was tyrannical, he was abusive, he was selfish. That was Duryodhana. And Krishna wanted him to be replaced by Yudhishthir. So that was a political change. So the Gita was in. So Krishna helped Arjuna to see that, okay, this is not just a political change. It's a political change for a spiritual purpose, because the way a society is administered will affect whether the society will rise towards spirituality or not. So why am I talking about all this? See, Krishna, in one sense, Arjuna was thinking, oh, this fighting is mundane. And actually, if I renounce the world and focus on, meditate on Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, whatever, meditate on Bhagavan, that is going to be spiritual. But Krishna said, no, you can remember the divine, you can remember me even while you are functioning in the world. Ma manusmara yuddhacha. So the purpose of the Gita was to spiritualize all activities in the world, including spiritualize a political challenge, a political confrontation that had become a military confrontation. The Pandavas and Kauravas, there was a conflict over who was going to rule, and that had become a military confrontation. So the Gita's purpose was to spiritualize politics, but statements like work is worship was used to completely despiritualize India's political focus. No, we don't need anything spiritual, just work, and that itself will be your worship. So that is definitely not the teaching of the Gita. Like, the Gita doesn't say that work ever replaces worship. Mam anusmara yuddhacha, Krishna says that. So he's not saying anusmara and yuddhacha are just two, are both of them the same thing. They're two distinct things, and both need to be done. So work as worship means not that work is worship, but that work done in a particular consciousness will be worship. Work done in a particular consciousness. And what is that consciousness? We'll try to understand that. So at this point, let's start from a little broader perspective, then come to specifically the Gita perspective. Generally, we may think of, work is just work. Okay, I have to go and do this job, or I have to go and do this particular assignment or whatever. But the fact is that our vision determines our motivation. Suppose somebody asks a teacher, what are you doing? And the teacher says that, I'm slaving to teach these stupid students something. Now, if the teacher considers the students to be stupid, the teacher doesn't even consider what subjects it is teaching. I'm just teaching something. Then naturally, the motivation is going to be low. And such a vision from the Gita's perspective is in the mode of ignorance. So our vision will determine our motivation. Then somebody say, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just struggling to earn my living. I have to have some job, and I've got this job, and I'm earning my living with this job. Okay, we're not focusing on the stupidity of the students. We're not focusing on the irrelevance of the subject. But okay, my purpose is earning a living. That's important for me. But here also, it is just I could earn my living by anything. Here, there is not much of a broader picture to it. So this is passionate, earning money. This is Rajasic motivation. Okay, I have to earn money, so I'll work hard. But if you look in terms of motivation, inspiration, if somebody is thinking, what am I doing while teaching? I am striving to train those who will be the world's future. Those who will be the world's future. Then immediately the vision will change. Oh, I'm doing something valuable. I'm doing something worthwhile. I'm doing something deeply meaningful. And that will enable the person to actually become much more motivated. So this is a bigger picture of reality. And in one sense, Krishna says, what is the characteristic of Sattva-guna? Sattvat sanjayate jnanam. That now jnana can refer to spiritual knowledge, but in Sattva-guna, one also has better knowledge of one's own immediate realities. Or a clearer understanding of what is going on, where one is at, what we are doing. One is not lost in a daze. So goodness brings illumination. So this is a much more inspiring vision for our work. Now, these are the three modes in which we may view any work, and the vision will shape the motivation. But if we consider an even bigger thing, so if we see that in the pure goodness, in the mood of bhakti, what Bhagavad Gita teaches, so I am working to be a part of God's plan in creating a better world and a better me. A better world and a better me. So there is a Loka Sangraha and there is Atma Sakshatkar. There is Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, the 6th chapter, that that sampashan, that one sees oneself. So this is, we are not just randomly functioning in the world. There is Krishna, the world works under Krishna's plan. We are parts of Krishna. Mamaimamsho jiva loke. Krishna says, Upadrishta Anumantacha. He's overseeing everything. And Nimitta Matram Bhavasavisachi. So we are all, wherever we are right now, we may say, oh, okay, I'm in this place because of my own karma, or it's because of my own desires. Well, okay, it may be because of our own karma, our own desires. But that does not mean Krishna has abandoned us. We are still a part of Krishna's plan. And Krishna's plan is still working no matter what our family or professional situation might be. And Krishna wants to use each one of us for two purposes. One is, he wants, Krishna's purpose is to dharma samsthapanartha, to make or bring about order in the world, to create a better world. And he wants us to create a better me. Create a better me means he wants us Puta madbhavamagataha. He wants us to become purified. He wants us to attain love for him. He wants us to manifest virtues. Yesterday I discussed about how Krishna talks about those devotees are most dear to him who are manifesting virtues in this world. So our existence and functioning in this world are not to be seen as random. They can be a part of a higher plan and a higher purpose. Now, when we talk about these two things, a better world and a better me, sometimes we may or may not succeed in creating a better world. But if we strive to create a better world means what? We do our endeavors, we do our part diligently. Then, by that diligence, we will create a better me. We will improve, we will become transformed. And this is demonstrated in the Bhagavad Gita itself. Toward the end of the Bhagavad Gita, there is the second conversation that comes to an end. The first conversation in the Gita is, or the central conversation in the Gita is between Krishna and Arjuna. And at the end of that conversation, what happens is Krishna completes his speech and Arjuna says, I am enlightened. Ashtomo hasmati labdha tat prasadan mayachyuta sthitosmi gata sandeha karishye vachanam tava. So he says that my illusion is dispelled. My memory is restored. I'm calm now. I will do your will. So that is mission successful. Krishna's speech transformed Arjuna, and then Arjuna will act in the world, and Arjuna will do something wonderful in the world to establish dharma. Now, after this, on 1873, the Bhagavad Gita could have ended. But it doesn't end. There are 5 more verses. And those are spoken by Sanjay. Now, why have those verses? In one sense, through those 5 verses, the teachings of the Gita are being demonstrated through the consciousness of Sanjay. Sanjay spoke the same message to Dhritarashtra, which Krishna spoke to Arjuna. Now, Krishna's message to Arjuna was successful. Arjuna was transformed. We consider Sanjay's message to Dhritarashtra, that was not successful in one sense. Dhritarashtra was not transformed. So the war was not avoided. The war was not avoided. Dhritarashtra did not throw his weight around and stop Duryodhana. But, so in one sense, we could say it was a failure. Sanjay speaking the words to Dhritarashtra were a failure, but they were not. Why? Because Sanjay, at one level, demonstrates detachment. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshi kadachana. That work without attachment to the fruits of your work. And Sanjay demonstrated that I did my work and I'm not attached to the results. But the Gita is not just talking about detachment from the results. The Gita is actually talking about something much bigger. The Gita also talks about becoming attached to the object of the ultimate object of work, that is Krishna. That detachment means we let go of something in this world to catch hold of something beyond this world. That something beyond this world is Krishna. So what is described at the end of the Bhagavad Gita is that Sanjay has become ecstatic. Rajan samsmritya samvadamimad keshavarjunayo punyam rishyami cha muhurmuhu taccha samsmritya रूपमत्यद्भुतं हरेः विस्मयो मे महान् राजन् हृष्यामि च पुनः पुनः. So what Krishna is telling over here is that, or what the Bhagavad Gita is demonstrating over here through Sanjay's example is that Sanjay has become attached to Krishna, is remembering Krishna's words, and Sanjay is remembering Krishna's form, and he has become ecstatic by that. And that is, Sanjay has become a better me. He has become transformed. He has become purified. He has become attached to the divine. He has changed. So the Gita's vision is that when we work as a part of the Lord's plan, by that we will be transformed. Each one of us will be transformed by that. I was talking recently with one devotee. He is now doing a lot of service in a particular temple. So when he was studying in IIT, he had just started coming to the programs, and he was in the first year of IIT, and he had a close friend of his, and that friend had also started becoming a devotee, but that friend was known to be a bit of highly emotionally driven kind of person, what we might call today something like a manic depressive kind of person. So when he heard about bhakti, he became so energized, so almost manic about it. And he said, oh, all this job and everything is worthless. All this IIT studies is worthless. I want to renounce the world and I want to join full-time right now. And he told his friend, you should also do it. It's all mundane. Waste your time. Don't waste your time. So he came and talked with me, talked with some of the senior devotees. And we told him, no, you should complete your studies. And then we explained to him, life is long and you have to create a foundation for yourself. And later on, if you want, you can join. So this friend, he said, no. Actually, those people, you want to surrender to Krishna and they are stopping you from surrendering to Krishna. So he said, you are like Vamandev and they are all like Shukracharya. They are stopping you from surrendering. So you should reject them. So he was a little taken aback by this kind of aggressive presentation. I said that this is just immaturity. He says, Vamandev was, he said, no, you are Bali Maharaj, not Vamandev, Bali Maharaj. You are Bali Maharaj, and that you want to surrender to Vamandev, but this is Shukracharya obstructing you. So I told him that Bali Maharaj is already deeply grounded in the principles of Dharma. He knew what was what. And we're not stopping you from surrendering. We're only telling you that not right now. Complete your education. So anyway, this devotee's friend, he said, no, I'm going to join the temple. So he went and joined the temple, and he stayed in the temple for a few months, and he got fed up with the temple. And now he not only left the temple, he left bhakti, and now he has become, we could say, almost like a religion hater. Why? Because he went from, generally we talk about bhoga and tyaga in material terms. You enjoy something and you renounce something. But some people can have the bhoga and tyaga attitude even toward bhakti. I do bhakti because I enjoy it. And if I stop enjoying it, then I just give it up completely. So now, as contrasted with that, this devotee, he said, yeah, I also didn't like my engineering studies so much. But what happened was, because all of you told me to stay on, I did the studies. Actually, this studying engineering, it forced me to discipline myself. It forced me to learn to control my mind and senses, because it was not something which I loved to do, but when I had to do it, it taught me discipline. And that teaching of discipline has helped me in all walks of my life, including my bhakti. Now when I have to do some services in the temple, if I don't get, if somehow maybe some devotees are non-cooperative, or something goes wrong, I don't get so agitated by it. So basically the point is that his work was not just mundane. It might have seemed mundane, but that work, by doing that work diligently, even if it was not, it didn't take one to Shuddha Sattva, at least it increased the Sattva within person. Sattva means what? Krishna says that one is able to control one's mind and senses for the purpose of dharma. That is Sattva. So it can create a better me. So in that sense, work as worship is that even if our work doesn't seem to be any way like worship right now, but it can create a better me who can do better worship in the future. So work is not to be seen only as mundane. So now let's discuss briefly about how to make work into worship. So yes. So now, as I said, work as worship, work can never replace worship. So the first thing is we need to have daily exclusive time for worship. It's not that from morning to night one just does one's work and says, I'm doing worship. No, we have to have some time for sadhana. So we may work at this third level in that hierarchy, at seva or swadharma, but we need some time for sadhana. For different people, the quantity may be different, but some amount of direct connection with Krishna is required. Then, when we need to study scripture, and studying scripture is not just like a intellectual ritual. Okay, this is something which every day I have to open this book and read it. By the purpose of studying scripture is to get a spiritual vision of ourselves and a spiritual vision of our work. That this is that I am a soul, I'm functioning in this world, and Krishna exists. Krishna's jurisdiction exists everywhere, including in the world where I am functioning. Then an important part of work as worship is Krishna talks about this detachment. If we do not have adequate detachment, then our work will not be actually worship, because we'll become very possessive and then we'll not be thinking about God at all. That's why there is diligence in doing our part, and there is dependence in letting Krishna do his part. Both of these are essential in a devotee's way of functioning. That Arjuna, if you consider, for example, when he was fighting on the 13th day, when Abhimanyu was killed, after that, Arjuna took the vow that I will neutralize Jayadratha the next day. And then that day, Arjuna fought like never before. There were miles and miles of Kaurava warriors, all arranged for the express purpose of obstructing him from reaching Jayadratha. And Arjuna plowed through all of them relentlessly. And as the sun was nearing the horizon, he came within striking distance of Jayadratha. And at that moment, Duryodhana did something, you could say, from his perspective, resourceful, but from ultimately just diabolical. Arjuna had reached there, and Duryodhana arranged 8 warriors. The previous 6 warriors attacked. Now he had 8 warriors attack Arjuna simultaneously. And Arjuna was like covered by a cloud of arrows. All he could do was just prevent those arrows from piercing him. He couldn't even see anything ahead. And he knew the sun was sinking down toward the horizon. Now he had done everything he could. And at that time, Krishna did what he couldn't. Krishna at that time raised his chakra and covered the solar disk, creating the illusion of sunset. Some people say it was an eclipse that happened at that time. We understand that eclipse is caused by a natural phenomena. Here, it was a supernatural intervention by Krishna's divine will. So, and then Krishna told Arjuna that there is, as all the opponents started cheering and jeering, say, oh, Arjuna, you are going to kill Jayadratha, you are the one who's going to die. And Jayadratha also was mocking Arjuna. Jayadratha came out. See, cowards, the nature of coward is not the absence of courage, as the pretense of courage as soon as danger has disappeared. So, coward, the nature of coward is this: even no coward will actually want to say that I don't have courage. But so they will pretend to have a lot of courage when there is no danger. So, like if somebody is fighting against an ant, and I say, "You ant, what can you do to me? I'm not afraid of you." And nobody in the world is afraid of an ant. So what happens is, so Jayadratha was hiding behind all these other warriors all this time. And when the sun set, he said, "Oh," he started coming forward to mock Arjuna. But at that time, when Jayadratha had just come within Arjuna's both visibility range and striking range, Krishna removed the sun's covering. Krishna told Arjuna that there is the sun and there is Jayadratha, shoot. And then right in front of all the Kauravas, shocked eyes, Arjuna, with the blinding speed, took the Brahmastra and shot. And the arrow just sped across the sky and lopped off Jayadratha's head. So what happened here was that when Arjuna did everything he could, and Krishna did what Arjuna couldn't. So there was diligence on Arjuna's part. Diligence means he did his part fully well. And then he will say, "Oh, what I do will not be enough." Okay, it may not be enough, but let me do my part. And then when Krishna wants, Krishna will do his part. Now, Arjuna could have said, if Krishna wanted to do something miraculous like this, Krishna could have done it right in the beginning itself. Now, why have him fight for the whole day? No, but Krishna wants the human endeavor to be there for the divine purpose to be fulfilled. So our work will be worship when we see that our work is a cooperative endeavor. That my endeavor, it's like a cooperative activity, not endeavor, cooperative activity. It is my endeavor, and there is the divine role also over there, the divine grace. If we are simply seeing this is my work and my success and my glory, then that work is not worship. To the extent we see that actually it is by divine grace that this work is being successful, to that extent that work will be worship. And how do we know if somebody is having dependence on the Lord? That is where the Gita's teaching of samatva comes up. Yesterday I talked about how the Gita focuses not so much on ecstasy as on equanimity. Why is that? Because the Gita is talking about functioning in the world. And if I think I brought about the success, then I will be elated when I succeed. And if I think that I failed to succeed, then I'll become dejected when I can't. But if I understand that I'm doing my part, and I did my part, and sometimes success comes, sometimes success doesn't come, then we'll be able to function without emotional extremes. Dukkeshvanudignamana, Sukheshvagatasvruha. So we accept the results without emotional extremes. And lastly, as much as possible, we try to cultivate remembrance of Krishna. So now here we talk about during, before, and after work. So during is generally quite difficult, but it happens gradually. So before our work, we start with a prayerful mood. After our work, we conclude the prayerful mood. Narayanayeti samarpayami, as we say. And gradually, as we keep doing this, then the mood of prayer will become infused within the work, even while we are doing the work. This does not necessarily mean that we will be literally remembering Krishna while we are doing the work. I'll talk about what remembrance of Krishna means in our future sessions. Because the whole session will be on cultivating remembrance of Krishna and understanding what remembrance of Krishna is. So let's not discuss this much. But the idea is, if you see, when Krishna talks about work as worship, it is not a category thing. Oh, anybody who does any work, that is worship. Krishna gives a whole system. Now, each of these, we can look at verses in the Gita which talk about this, these themes, that this is how work becomes worship. So when it is done in this consciousness, then what happens is our worship directs work. Why am I doing my work? Because I worship my Lord and I want to serve him through all areas of my life. So if this is my job, I want to do that also in a mood of service to the Lord. And then our work animates our worship. That means that through our work, we see God acting in our life, and then we want to connect more with that Lord who's acting in our lives. And that's why they become symbiotic. The spirituality, our bhakti it does not compartmentalize it like this is material, this is spiritual. No, it permeates our entire life. And that's what the Gita's teaching is. It's an integral teaching. It's not black and white. It is not 1-0. This is material, this is spiritual. No. Yes, there is our functioning in the world. There is our connecting with the Lord of the world. They're two distinct things. But even our functioning in the world is also meant to connect us with the Lord of the world. So in terms of a pendulum, we could say that somebody may say, I say Krishna only in my work. That's a illusion. Krishna, we will not be able to see Krishna in the work. We'll only see Maya. We'll see money, we'll see power, we'll see position, or we'll see insecurity. Or we may say, there is no Krishna in this work. So we see no Krishna in the work, we dismiss it as mundane. That's also an extreme. The balanced understanding is, we see Krishna in our work and we seek him directly through our sadhana. So that both are required. Ma manusmara yuddhacha. We seek him through sadhana and we see him in our work. And that's how the work becomes worship. So this whole class could be summarized by this one sentence. What does work as worship means? It means work with values to create things of value and to realize what is of ultimate value. So we work with values. Work with values means this could, like I said, this could be like a summary of the class. I started by talking about how all work is not worship. That a robber or murderer, they can't say they worship. They have to work with values. Broadly, the values may vary specifically, but the work with some principles. And then we are doing something tangible in the world. That like this teacher is not just thinking, oh, I'm teaching the stupid students. No, create things of value. That I am educating the future generation of the world, the future leaders, future of the world, basically. Or as I said, I'm a part of God's plan to create a better world and a better me, and to realize what is of ultimate value. Now, this part is what is important. See, work with values, many people will talk about it. To create things of value, that also many people talk about it. But what the Bhagavad Gita's special contribution is that through this process, we will realize what is of ultimate value. What is of ultimate value means what? That we understand in one sense, Nama bina kichu nahi koar, chauda bhuvana maji, that beyond Krishna and his name, there's nothing of value. But just hearing these assertions may not really necessarily give us that realization. But when we function in the world in a mood of service to Krishna, we sometimes achieve success, we sometimes don't achieve success. But gradually through this process, we start realizing, oh, these things don't matter that much. No, these things are not really what is important. Through the process of working in a mood of service, we will realize that it is Krishna who is of ultimate value. And we will see that Arjuna fought the Kurukshetra war and he fought it diligently. But at the end of it, when everything was lost, he took shelter of Krishna. I described in the Bhagavatam. He realized what is of ultimate value. So just like there is the idea of there's the idea of brahmacharis, there are upakurvan brahmacharis and nashtik brahmacharis. So for most people, they may understand intellectually that life's purpose is spiritual, but they need to go to grahastha ashram to eventually realize what is of ultimate value. So that applies not just to sensual pleasure, but that applies to worldly engagement also. That for most of us, that we function in the world and we achieve certain things in the world, and we realize, okay, I may not have achieved all that I wanted, but what I have achieved also, okay, it's good in its own way, but it doesn't really bring fulfillment. It doesn't bring really meaning in my life. There has to be something more valuable. So we realize what is of ultimate value. So this is how when Krishna says mat karma paramo bhava. So by doing karma, what will happen is parama. What is parama? What is transcendental? We will realize that. And that is the mechanism of bhakti. So bhakti, we may say, is connecting with Krishna. But connecting with Krishna is not just the action of connecting with Krishna. Connecting with Krishna is also the conviction that Krishna is most worth connecting with. And that conviction will come when we function in the world in a mood of service to Him. And that is what is this level that Krishna says that by working in this mood, by working in this way, you will rise towards realizing me as the ultimate value. So I'll summarize. I spoke today on this topic of this 12.10, that is work as worship. So we discussed selflessness in 12.11, and 12.8 is work. In work, there can be seva and there can be swadharma. That is, we do direct service to Krishna and we do our work as a service to Krishna. So in that connection, we discussed that is work worship? No, the Gita teaches work as worship. With this, the Venn diagram, they are two distinct. Work means activities we function in, activities we do in this world for our sustenance, for remuneration, for position. And worship is what we do to connect with the source of the world. So if somebody says work is worship, they are overlapping the two categories. And the problems are twofold. First of all work is not sacred. Robbing, killing is not sacred. Just mechanical hard work, also like donkeys, is not necessarily sacred or special. And it doesn't make worship redundant, because worship is meant to elevate our consciousness, and work itself may not always elevate our consciousness. So how do we find the intersection between the two, where we can work as worship? First of all, why do we need to find that? Because for our work to be done well, what is our vision of that work will determine our motivation. So in Tamoguna, the vision is very constructed. Oh, this work is so tough and the students are so stupid, I have to somehow teach them. In Rajoguna, I am earning my living. In Sattva-guna, I am creating the world's, helping create the world's future. In Shuddha Sattva, I am actually a part of the Lord's plan to create a better world and a better me. So then we discuss the 6 points of how to do work as a form of worship. Have daily exclusive time for worship. Then study scripture to get a spiritual vision of oneself and one's work. And then after we've done that, then we do our part and let Krishna do his part. We do our part diligently, with diligence, and we are dependent on Krishna for doing his part. Then we avoid emotional extremes, because we see that my purpose not just to succeed in this world, it is to connect with Krishna beyond this world. And then we try to remember Krishna as much as possible during the process of doing our work, at least before and after, if not during. And then in this way, work will animate our worship and worship will direct our work, and the two will become symbiotic. And that's how we can work with values to create things of value in the world and to realize what is of ultimate value. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any reflections, questions? Yes, Rambabu Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dhanavad Pranam.
Yes.
Prabhuji, for Arjuna, I mean, the work is actually beneficial for the kingdom. The fight is required to protect the kingdom. I mean, it shouldn't go into the hands of the irreligious people. So that higher cause is there. But in general, right, when I work, right, it mostly promotes or enhances the sense gratification of the people in general. So it becomes a demotivating factor to see the work as worship here. Can you please?
Okay. Now, when we work, it is mostly promoting the sense gratification of people. I would say this is a very reductionistic way of looking at things. Because, how should I put it? Say right now, for example, we are having this class on Zoom. When the pandemic came, the world would have stopped, but there was digital technology available by which the world continued on, at least to some extent, even when mostly the world was locked down. So now, was all this for sense gratification? Well, the word sense gratification sometimes we use in a very, very broad sense. In the world, we sometimes use this categorization spiritual and material. But we miss out that in material there is sattva, rajas, and tamas. And they are quite different. And not everybody in the material world is only obsessed with sense gratification. Yes, that is definitely a significant part of people's lives. Maybe a major part of not maybe, a major part of the majority of people's lives. But it's not what everybody is solely concerned about. There are people in sattva. And even when you want to have sense gratification, there are different kinds of sense gratification. What I mean by that is that actually sometimes we conflate all the three modes as if they are material and equal. But sattva, rajas, and tamas are hugely different. Sattva is sattva involves thoughtfulness. Sattva involves certain level of selflessness. Sattva involves certain level of charity, concern for others. And there are people who are like that in the world. So what to speak of conflating sattva with rajas and tamas? Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in the Chaitanya Shikshamrita that we should not even conflate rajas and tamas. He says the rajas and tamas are also significantly different. Why? He says that rajas can be a vital antidote for most people to the toxicity of tamas. That rajas can be an antidote. If you consider tamas to be like a poison, rajas is an antidote. What do I mean by this? That let me give some examples to illustrate this point. That if somebody says rajas and tamas are equivalent, consider parents. Indian parents can sometimes be very overbearing or over demanding. Do this, do this, do this, do this, and people may feel, oh, my parents have so much expectation from me. Now we may feel like that when we were under our parents. Now, when we become parents, we may also become like that. But either way, the point is that is, even if somebody might consider that to be rajasic, but rajasic parents are 100 times better than tamasic parents. What do you mean by tamasic parents? Tamasic parents are just people who don't have a job. They just get stoned, and their kids have to scrape around to get some food to eat, and they're in constant fear they will be taken by child protection services, and they may go into foster home or orphanages or whatever. So children who have lived through that, they have to go through a lot of inner work before they can even become functional adults. So rajas and tamas is a big difference. Say for example, if we are using some device and it doesn't you can say the whole world is rajasic, but at least if they're rajasic, we phone them, they will have some customer support and they will fix it. But the tamasic is, you paid for it, now you live with it, I don't care for it. So rajas and tamas, there's a big difference between them. So I would say, just to say that the whole world is working only for sense gratification is a oversimplification. There are people in sattva, there are people in rajas, there are people in tamas. And we as devotees, one of the characteristics of the godly nature is apaishunam. Apaishunam means that we should be averse to fault finding. So to say that everybody is just doing sense gratification, well, yeah, I mean, when people don't know anything spiritual, sensual pleasure will be a purpose of their life, no doubt, and it may be a prominent purpose. But it also makes a difference. How are they getting that sensual pleasure? Somebody may say that, okay, if somebody is working in the medical field, they're treating people, but they're treating patients so that they'll make money. Okay, but in the process, they're saving people's lives. If somebody is making some technology, well, the technology people may use for sense gratification. And they may also want to do sense gratification their money, but they're making technology, and the technology can be used for good things. And like I gave the example of the internet and Zoom, we used it for continuing our getting spiritual nourishment and continuing our spiritual practices, even having online festivals. So the majority of the world will be in Rajo and Tamoguna, and that is just the nature of Kali Yuga. But to say that everybody is engaged only in sense gratification is a very negative way of looking at our work. We have to find meaning in what we are doing. And that means, see how whatever work we are doing is adding value to people's lives. Yes, it may be adding value to people who are sense gratifiers also. But just take this as an example. Suppose somebody is a doctor, somebody is an eye surgeon. And if that eye surgeon thinks that, even if I treat people's eyes, People are only going to look at sensual things and contaminate themselves, and they're going to do sinful activity. So why should I treat people's eyes? Well, is it that everybody, maybe majority of people are going to do that? But does that mean everybody is going to do that? See, somebody who would have lost their eyes, they get their eyes, and they may take care of their family, they may do something valuable for the world. They may become devotees, that's wonderful. But even if they don't, so that is, we have to learn to see the value of what we are doing. So the idea that the whole world is engaged in sense gratification is true, but then how is sense gratification being sought? Did that you are doing something, contributing something, and then getting something in return by which people promote their sense gratification? If they're giving something of value, then that is an exchange, and that is a we could say that is a principle of reciprocation. Now, what people want to do with what they get, that's up to them. But I don't think we should have such a reductionistic or such a negative view of either the world or what our profession in the world. Otherwise, it will be very, very difficult to function. We need to see how there is Rajoguna, Tamoguna is there, but there is Sattva-guna also, and Sattva-guna contributes value. Rajoguna also in its own way, at least it contributes value to counter Tamoguna. So in that sense, it's valuable. So yesterday I think I mentioned this point, or no, I did not. See, what happens is sometimes our tradition and our movement, we focus on establishing Shuddha Sattva as supreme, and therefore, as contrast with Shuddha Sattva, everything else is considered to be just worthless. And that is one way of looking at it, and that is true. Recently, I was talking with one devotee who was a very senior Prabhupada disciple, and he was like the embodiment of the black and white. Prabhupada is given pure spirituality, and everything else is just Mayavad, Khichdi, and all the nonsense. I mean, all spiritual leaders coming from India are fools and rascals. But he told me that he went on a tour of India. He went to the Northeast, then he went to South India. And Northeast, many of you know that it's highly there's a lot of aggressive Christian conversion in some of the states. One cannot even come out and practice Hinduism openly. In South India, even according to some statistics, in Tirupati there are more churches than temples. So he told me that his realization after being here is that many of these so-called spiritual leaders, whom he would earlier call as fools and rascals. Now these are popular spiritual leaders who are called Hindu spiritual leaders. He said, maybe they are not in the house of the Vedas, like Prabhupada talked of the house of the Vedas. The center of that is Krishna, and there are very devatas in the outer rooms. He said, but at least because of these spiritual leaders, people are staying in the vicinity of the house of the Vedas. Without these many other spiritual teachers, maybe many more people would have become Christians. Many more people would have become Muslims. Now, we are not endorsing these spiritual leaders. That's not the point I'm making over here. Everybody has a place in Krishna's plan. So, it is not that if there had been no other spiritual teachers like these, everybody would have been a pure devotee. No, pure devotees were rare even in Satyuga. What is that? In the Muktanam api siddhanam Narayana Parada Sudurlabha Prashantatma Kotishwar Mahamuni. So pure devotion was rare even in Satyuga, then what to speak of in Kali Yuga? Then it's better that people at least are favorable to Dharma in some way, favorable to Vedas, favorable to deities, favorable to India in some way. So to have that, this is Mayavad in my understanding. To consider that everything is sense gratification. To consider that everybody is a fool and rascal. Okay, everybody may be fool and rascal, but there are degrees of fools and rascals. There are some fools and rascals who may not be giving the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita, and there are some fools and rascals who are going to burn the Bhagavad Gita. And there is a significant difference between the two of them. So let's try to have a more positive vision of the work that we are doing. And that way we can contribute more we can contribute more positively. We cannot really, if we are just looking at the world very negatively, then we cannot function. See, when Prabhupada said, be pessimistic. See, we should be pessimistic about the world's capacity to give us pleasure. But we need to be optimistic about God's capacity to empower us to make a contribution in the world. The two are very separate things, and we can't conflate the two. So I'll just post this. Every day on WhatsApp, I post a status quote. So this was a recent quote. So when we say be pessimistic about the world, be pessimistic about the world's potential to provide us gratification. But we need to be optimistic about our potential by God's grace to make a contribution in the world. If not in the world, in at least our corner of the world. So yes, even if somebody says that, okay, this is all for self gratification, well, maybe we can be a part of the difference. We can bring a little bit more sattva into our profession. And if Krishna wants, he'll empower us to bring in more sattva later. Okay. Are there any other questions?
Yes, Prabhu, Krishna Dandapanam. Thank you, Prabhu, for the very nice lecture and work as worship. This is something I have heard, a lot of times. Very work is worship, like that kind of phrase, but it should be work as worship, as you rightly pointed out and explained. Thank you for the nice presentation. And I had a question, Prabhu, about purification through work. So work, if it is according to the religious principles and the kind of varna and interest of the person, then can it be a mode of purification?
Yeah, agreed, definitely. Actually, Varnashram itself is a huge subject, and that's why I didn't go into that. One of the three things over here. See, there is Varna as 4 categories: Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. Then there is our particular nature, and there are professions in the world today. So all three are complex. Okay, there are 4 Varnas. So we may say there is Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. And say today we consider a profession like being a professor in a university. And normally we may think a professor is teaching, so they are Brahmana. But then I have talked with many devotees who are in faculty, and they say one of their major amount of, if not time, at least emotional energy and thought goes in raising funds for various projects. And then they have to pitch for the funds, and they have to write project proposals, and they have to make presentations and solicit things. So one devotee is a brilliant professor. He's won many awards. He was telling me, I sometimes think whether am I being a Brahmana or I'm being a Vaishya. That I have to solicit money so much. So my point is that, I'm not saying that professor work is not Brahmana, it's only Vaishya. I'm saying that the categorization of conventional categories or the correlation of conventional categories with contemporary professions is very difficult. So somebody may say that this particular profession is Brahman, this particular profession is Kshatriya, somebody works in the business. What does that mean? You may say that's a Vaishya. But maybe in business, their primary work is more with accounts. They're not really dealing with people. They're dealing with money. Okay, that's definitely Vaishya, we say. But if you see, traditionally, Vaishyas dealt with non-human resources, basically, like cows and things like that. So is this Vaishya? According one way of understanding traditional calculation is Shudras deal with things. So is currency a thing or is it a being? Well, it's a thing, but that's Vaishya. So sometimes businessmen do much more managerial work. They may do. So my point is that this categorization, it can be applied, but it's not very easy to apply. And on top of that, our own nature, it's not so easy to figure out exactly what our nature is. Will it really fit into my nature? Fits into Brahmana, my nature fits into Kshatriya, my nature fits into Vaishya. Because we have had various influences while growing up. We have had many previous lives, possibly even in Kali Yuga itself, where there was already multiple influences of Varana coming up. So rather than worrying too much about, okay, which is the work according to my nature, rather than that, focus on two things in my understanding. That is comfort and competence. So guna karma vibhagashaha. So guna, if there is something which is, we have the qualities for doing that, then we will be comfortable doing it. And karma means competence. We are good at doing it. So what do we feel good doing and what are we good at doing? So just whatever work we have to do in our current professional role, within that itself, try to observe. Okay, I may have to do maybe 15 different things in my work. What is it that I like to do the most? Like this with the devotee faculty professor, I was talking with him, and he said that I actually like to teach much more than I want to do fundraising, and I can do research, but I like to teach much more. So, but he said that to teach, I have to do fundraising. But then once I started getting into fundraising, now fundraising has become the main thing and I get no time to teach. So I suggested to him that, okay, by fundraising, I mean, he's doing his projects, getting sponsorship for the projects. So I said, okay, rather than trying to classify as this is Brahmanical, this is Vaishya, this is Shudra, or this is Kshatriya, whatever, you focus on within the current profession that we are in. What is it that which particular activity you will be comfortable doing, which particular activity you are competent at, and you find that interest one in some activities where there's intersection of both, then try to do that more. So it's not that there has to be a radical change of one's profession. And now, where does purification come more? That's difficult to say. My understanding with respect to work, rather than focusing on purification, we can focus more on minimizing friction. Friction means if we are doing work which is highly incompatible with our nature, say if somebody just doesn't like to meet with people and then they are in marketing, that's going to be miserable for them. Maybe they can be a researcher or something like that. The researchers also have to do marketing at times. They have to pitch their proposal, but they don't have to. They can work with their own ideas and products for much more than what they have to work with people. So broadly speaking, within whatever profession we are in, we try to move towards that kind of work where our inner friction is the least. And then what does purification mean? Purification essentially means that the mind becomes calmer so that it is focused on what is important. In Sattva Guna, the mind is relatively easily focused on what we want to do. So the Sattva is focused on Krishna. So if we can avoid friction within our work substantially, that itself will lead to we being more focused. We'll become calmer. And in that sense, we'll be achieving the purpose of purification. So try to minimize friction in the work.
Thank you, Prabhu. That was really helpful and nice explanation.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yes, Vijay Damodar Prabhu.
Thank you, sir.
The last question, then we'll stop here.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for this wonderful coming down and to this part of the world. I'm sorry that you felt sick, but hope you get quickly okay. A quick question with respect to mapping of the chapter verses 12, 8, 8, 9, 10, 11 to the dialogue between Ramananda Rai and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. If I understand correctly, the layers that are built over there is Varnashram Dharma, Krishna Karma, renunciation, Gyan Mishra Bhakti, then pure Bhakti, and then all the other ones of that, right? So with respect to these verses, the one that you told today, could that be called as something that would lie between Varnashram Dharma and Krishna Karma? And would the previous verses at 12.8, 12.9, 12.10, would they be more like 12.8, 12.9 particularly, be more towards Gyan Mishra Bhakti or Gyan Shunya Bhakti? How would that map?
Okay. See, this specific classification, like Gyana Karma, Gyana Shuddha, all this, none of these terms come in the Bhagavad Gita at all. In fact, with the Bhagavad Gita, even the term Nishkam Karma Yoga or Sakam Karma Yoga, even they don't come.
True.
So the Bhagavad Gita is a natural conversation between two people. And then subsequent commentators have analyzed and they have categorized. And Baldev Vidyabhushan categorizes in a different way. Vishwanath Thakur categorizes in a different way. And in Ramananda Ray's conversation, they categorize in a different way. Ramananda Ray and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu categorize in a different way. In my understanding, the whole thrust of the Ramananda Ray conversation is to highlight the super excellence of the devotion of Radharani toward Krishna, and everything builds towards that. Builds toward that. So in this particular analysis, I'm not sure. It's like there are different systems of analysis. Say like if you have allopathy and you have Ayurveda, both are meant to restore a person to health. But the founding elements of analysis in Ayurveda are Kapha Vata Pitta. Now in allopathy, there is nothing like Kapha Vata Pitta directly. There is, you can say that bile, we use the word bile, mucus and other things like that. But they are not exactly the same, and they are not critical elements in allopathy anyway. So there are different systems of classification. And sometimes some correlation can definitely be made. Like in both systems of classification, the bodily organs are the same. Now the body is going to be different. So some correlations can be made, but precise one-to-one correlation may not be possible. And if it's possible, it requires a lot of technical precise study. So I'm not sure whether Jnana Shunya or Jnana Mishra Bhakti would apply here, because in this particular section, Krishna has already said that no, Jnana is not the way to go to. That Kleshodiktarastesha. He's talking about Bhakti only, and in one sense, one's capacity to connect with Krishna. So it's mostly all of these are engaged forms of Bhakti. So it would be more from karma in the world with greater and greater element of Bhakti involved, so that Bhakti alone eventually predominates. But I think a precise correlation would be difficult, because there are two different systems of analysis with different purposes. So Mahaprabhu's Samvad with Ramananda Ray is to establish Radharani's glory. Krishna's Samvad with Arjuna is to get Arjuna to do his dharma in the world. So because of different contexts, the way of classification is quite different.
Thank you, Prabhu. So just to follow up, then is there any particular preference if one chooses allopathy over homeopathy? Or let's put it like the other way around. Doing the traditional ISKCON style japa service or whatever, some of this karma-based approach, apologize for that, doesn't kind of appeal so much as the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu kind of that kind of apathy. Because in this case, you kind of have to associate what you would do otherwise without being Krishna wise, and then you apply to make things successful, right? And then get closer to Krishna. Whereas doing the way ISKCON style thing is, we kind of either lose our attachment or our interest or whatever you want to say, our over the Venn diagram overlap over the worldly things kind of automatically either mitigates or diminishes. So it doesn't appeal that much. Is there something wrong with it?
I'm not sure I understand the question. What doesn't appeal?
The work,
and what is
work
ISKCON's approach?
based approach, the one that kind of was the highlight of today's lecture, or where you actually use the karma based efforts towards ultimately realizing the higher value, which is higher principle of Krishna. So this way of looking at things versus the one where you kind of get out of this and minimize your overlap with the world and the work or karma, and then you kind of do more of Abhyas Yoga, for example.
Okay. So
is there any preference between the two? Is it okay if one chooses more?
Definitely there's a hierarchy. So Krishna does talk about 12.8 as the highest, becoming absorbed in he is the highest.
Right.
And then Abhyasa is higher. So the hierarchy is undeniable.
I see.
And in that sense, if somebody can be always remembering Krishna, then that is the best.
Of course, yeah. Always is true. But if not always, at least try.
No, but the point is that see, overall the ethos of the Bhagavad Gita is not so much what is better as what is better for me. What is better for me, not what is better, but what is better for me.
Mhm.
Because Arjuna, in one sense, was under the notion that renouncing the world is better than engaging in the world. But Krishna tells Arjuna, according to your swabhava, engaging in the world is better. So sometimes talking in terms of absolutes is less helpful, because we don't live in absolutely categorized world. So somebody may say, okay, brahmacharya ashram or sannyas ashram is better, and grahastha ashram is so entangling. But it's not that simple. Because for somebody, and I'm not saying somebody in the negative sense, for most people, even throughout history, the renounced order is not, even if you look in Ramayana and the Mahabharata, even there, most of the sages are married. So literally renouncing the world is very rare. So simply saying that, okay, renouncing the world and practicing bhakti is better. Well, in principle, it might be better. But in practice, our minds and our bodies may not be suited for that. And the agitation, the struggle because of that may be so much more that it may be more difficult for us. So in my understanding that, yes, there is a hierarchy, but just because something is higher in the hierarchy doesn't necessarily mean that we going there will be better situated in bhakti, because we may not be ready for that right now. So the idea is we are somewhere right now. So in bhakti, there are two aspects to it, and both are aspects of devotion. There is an aspiration for a more conducive devotional situation. Oh, if only I could stay closer to the temple, or if only I had a job that did not take so many hours, or if only my colleagues or my family members were more favorable, supportive of my bhakti. So aspiration for a more devotionally supportive situation, devotionally conducive situation, that is one aspect of bhakti, definitely. But another aspect of bhakti is acceptance of our present situation. Because that present situation has also come by Krishna's plan. It is within Krishna's arrangement. It is not just by some random chance or something that I have landed up in a particular job, in a particular relationship, or in a particular health situation. So if in aspiring for something better in the future, I am filled with negativity and resentment for my present, then it's like in trying to seek Krishna in the future, I'm not seeing Krishna in my present at all. That is not healthy. So we need to be able to both see Krishna in whatever way he's manifested in our present situation. And of course, we want Krishna to be manifested more. But I want to see how Krishna is manifested. So we aspire for that. So both aspiring and accepting, both are integral parts of bhakti. And if sometimes we only focus on aspiring for some higher level, and because of that, it leads to resenting our present situation, then that can be very that will not be very Krishna conscious, because then our bhakti will not be priti purvakam. It will be more like grana purvakam. It will be filled with negativity.
Right.
So accepting our present situation is also an important part of bhakti. Okay.
Yeah, Prabhu. I think I got it. Yeah, it's a constant struggle between laulyam and figuring out what is right for me. So, but thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
You can say no, laulyam and sharanagati are. It's more of what is the word for acceptance? Atmanikshepa karpanya. As I say, the karpanya is okay. I'm in the situation. I accept it. I depend on you, Krishna. Yes, thank you.
Sure. So thanks a lot. Really appreciate it, Prabhu. Very advice.
So, Kautukarana Prabhu, can we have the question tomorrow? You're okay with that? So thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanande.
Yes, Prabhuji ki
Jai.
jai.
So the next session will be on Saturday morning, and Prabhu will continue the series on Saturday morning at the temple. Krishna willing. Well, thanks everyone. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We'll end the
Prabhupada
broadcast.
ki jai. Bhagavad Gita ki jai.
8 o'clock, Mataji. 8 o'clock.